Dadhood. Modern Dadhood podcast.
Another episode.
Back at it again. It's Adam and Marc.
It's a great jingle, dude.
I just wrote that.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Another episode of Modern Dadhood. An ongoing conversation about the joys, challenges, and general insanity of being a dad in this moment. Tell our listeners who you are.
I think we're exhibiting a little of the insanity right now.
Yeah.
Maybe.
This started off real hot.
My name is Marc Checkett, and I'm a dad to twin boy 7-year-olds. I had to think
Not
about
toddlers anymore. You almost
No.
said twin boy toddlers, didn't you?
That would have taken me way back. Yeah. no,
Flashback.
man, they're grown. They're grown men now with huge hulking chests and full beards.
Exhibiting toxic masculinity everywhere they go.
It just oozes
seeps,
out of
yeah.
their pores, you know?
And my name's Adam Flaherty. I'm a dad to 2 daughters who are 11 and 8.
Danger,
Just making our jaws drop all the time with the incredible things that they're doing.
danger, womanhood approaching.
That should be you know how like they make fake highway signs that you can put up?
Yeah.
We should do one of those in our house. It says,
It's, yeah.
danger, womanhood approaching. Well, we got a good episode. I'm very excited for our listeners to hear it because we had this really great conversation with Chris Robbins, who is the founder of Soul Degree, which is a personal development program specifically for men. I learned a lot from him. Chris also happens to be the husband of Mel Robbins, who is an incredibly popular self-help thought leader and podcaster
Author,
herself.
podcaster, you know.
#1 podcast on Apple right now, which is just remarkable.
Pretty bananas.
We're
Great.
psyched for Mel and for their family business, which is just thriving, and we'll get to that very soon. But first, Marc, for maybe new listeners who are coming on board, do you want to give them a quick rundown of what this whole thing is about and where maybe they can find some of our stuff?
This whole thing, you mean this podcast?
Yeah, Modern Dadhood, the podcast.
Yeah. Well, let's see. This show is an opportunity for me and you, who are 2 dads, who are not, well, we're not experts in fatherhood, are we?
We're not.
No.
We've often said that we're just a couple of dinks who like being dads and like talking about. But although approaching 120 episodes in, I feel like we've talked to enough smart people.
We can't possibly still be dinks.
We're
Can
not
we?
just dinks, right? Maybe we're novices, but we're learning as we go.
Yeah, we're standing on the precipice of a new territory upon which we will exit the land of dinkage. But let's see. Yeah, we talk to a lot. You just said it. We talk to a lot of amazing people. We interview dads of all walks of life on this show with different perspectives in the hopes of not just us getting a little bit smarter, maybe, and getting a little bit better, but with the hopes of helping our listeners as well, and maybe entertaining folks along the way. Where can they listen to the show? They can listen to the show. Give me a second. I'm coming into this kind of hot, if I'm being honest.
Okay. You want me to just hop in?
No. Just let me get a sip of this Harpoon IPA. How was your day, Adam?
I will tell you. My day was fine.
Yeah.
I'm loving this daylight savings thing. The extra hour in the evening is awesome.
That is
Kids
good.
outside, kind of playing, getting the energy out.
Yeah.
Just brings a whole new vibe, which is a welcome change because as we chatted about with Chris, actually, you start to just get into this groove that feels very formulaic, and it's nice to have something to break it up.
Indeed.
And daylight savings is I know a lot of people complain about it, but for me, it's a nice way to kind of just shake things up a little bit when your schedule starts to feel kind of like it's the same every day.
Yeah. I was just going to say, you got a very positive take on the whole thing. I'll be honest. I feel like complaining about daylight savings is sort of the thing to do, but you're a very glass is half full kind of person around this right now.
I don't want to like dominate this conversation with positivity, but there are a few cool things also happening with our podcast right now.
Well, I was going to say, I think we've got a really exciting thing to tell our listeners. And if you don't mind, I'm just going to gush for you for a second.
I don't know which one you're even going to say, so go for it.
I was going to talk about the fact that Adam here of Modern Dadhood fame has a wonderful article right now on katiecouric.com, which is entitled, "Is Your Kid Dealing with Big Feelings? 5 Tactics to Try Right Now." And I must say, my guy, you wrote a fantastic little article here with some amazing tips. It's short and to the point and chock full of like real thoughts and actionable things that like anybody could take something away from. And I just want our listeners to know about it and go check it out.
Well, thanks, man. The hope is that they will allow for more of these because I had a lot of fun writing it.
Smart move by them.
You know, we've got such a strong archive now, and we've covered so much subject matter that there's really limitless potential for different topics to write about.
Indeed.
But there's a couple other cool things happening.
What else?
And I'm gonna go through these fast
buzz through them.
Because I want to get to Chris Robbins as soon as possible. One is that, Mark, you and I are going to be at Podcast Movement Evolutions Conference, which is the very end of March into the first few days of April. It's taking place in Chicago. If anybody's going to be there, please reach out to us. We would love to connect with you in person. I went last year when it was in LA, and it was a super valuable experience. Took back a lot of knowledge, made a lot of new friends who I'm still in touch with online, and learned about a whole bunch of new podcasts that I'm still interested in as well. The other thing was we got a new trailer for the show.
Oh, indeed.
Which was a lot of fun to make, and I think it came out pretty well.
I'm a big fan of it, and yeah, I had a ton of fun making it. Obviously long overdue, a trailer for a show that's got 100 and some odd episodes, but better late than never is what I say.
I think so too. There are audio and video versions of the trailer, which are slightly different from one another. I recommend checking out the video version, which is on our YouTube channel, or if you go to moderndadhood.com and scroll down to the bottom, you can find it there. Let's zip back though, Mark, because I want you to just quickly let people know where they can find the podcast and anything else that you feel is relevant to deliver right now.
You can find Modern Dadhood wherever you find podcasts, like, let's see, Apple, Spotify, Hark Audio, Amazon podcasts, wherever you like to listen to your audio media. We're also at moderndadhood.com, where you can find our entire back catalog.
If you haven't subscribed to the podcast, please do wherever you listen and leave a review. The last thing is tell a friend about the show. If you really like the podcast and what you're hearing, please tell a friend, share the episode with a friend, or just mention it to them, you know, as you're enjoying that extra hour of daylight.
I would say start with the trailer with your friend that you're going to tell about the show.
Hot damn. That's a great idea, Mark. Mark, something a little bit serendipitous happened in that I should back that up and say I listen to the Mel Robbins podcast. I'm a fan. I think there's a lot of great actionable items that are relevant to people of all ages, but I don't need to plug that show. It's already
I think it's doing fine.
Popular. But I follow Mel on social as well. And she posted this graphic that was like very directly connected to something that we talked to Chris a little bit about towards the end of the interview. She posted this graphic that's, I'll read it. It says, "This is my number one piece of parenting advice. When your kids are upset about something, ask them this question. Do you want me to listen or do you want advice?" And then it says 99% of the time, they just want to feel heard by you. And it really struck me because when either of my daughters, 11 or 8, are upset about something, don't know if it's just the fact that I'm a man, but my tendency is I want to help them fix the situation.
Get in there.
So I'm offering suggestions or telling them what they might say or how they might work through it, when really I should take the advice of this graphic and Mel and maybe think about just saying, hey, do you want advice or would you like me to just listen to you? I think that's pretty powerful. What do you think about it?
I think it's amazing. I think it's a great reminder. And I'm even just thinking like adult to adult. That's probably not a bad tactic to take periodically.
Yeah.
We've all had conversations with our friends or spouses or adult siblings or whatever, where the situation is, I'm like you, right? And somebody comes to me with like this thing, my knee-jerk reaction is to always kind of be like, I'm going to listen, but I'm also going to be like, okay, how can I help? Have you tried this? What about this? Have you thought about this? I do the same thing with my kids. And then, you get into this sort of discourse where you're all of a sudden like, you're doing a lot of talking, and maybe that person didn't want any of that. And maybe that person or that kid of yours just needs to get something out and know that they're heard by somebody. We do this thing, and this is not, this is something that we have worked on a bunch in our family therapy sessions. We will sort of engage in this like play with our kids where the idea is we're there and we're present and we're available, but we're kind of passive in the sense that like they get to do everything. They get to make all the decisions, call all of the shots in this space for this time. And one of the things that we're trying to do in that instance is sort of mirror back or parrot back or put words to the things that they're doing and feeling and the stuff that they're sort of acting out, which is also, I think, a really great way to sort of just be in this like gentle sort of space where you're consistently letting that child know, I see you, I'm hearing you, I'm understanding you. And we do that for a couple of reasons, this session. Maybe one day we'll have a whole episode where we talk about this method.
I'm actually fascinated by that. Yeah.
Yeah. Because there's kind of a lot to it, but it's just hearing you read that graphic just makes me think about how important that listening piece is and letting them know that you're listening, and that you're there and that you're hearing them, and just how important it is in that aspect. Yeah, man, that's huge. What a great reminder.
And I thought it was just interesting that I saw that, just very shortly after we talked to Chris.
Well, obviously,
about some of that as well.
Obviously, Chris got off of our session and was just gushing to Mel.
Yeah. I
Really?
love that version of the story is so good.
Yeah.
And in that version of the story, we're number 2 on Apple Podcasts.
Yeah. Oh,
right,
great.
right behind Mel.
Right behind Mel.
Right behind Mel and right over Joe Rogan.
Just nestled in there. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, why don't we share our recent conversation with Christopher Robbins with our listeners right now? Chris Robbins lives in Vermont. He is the founder of Soul Degree, a personal development program for men. He's had a wide-ranging career. He's a dad of 3, and we're really grateful to have him on Modern Dadhood. So, Chris, thank you so much for making time to join us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. We're excited about this. So you've got what seems like a lot going on in your life with Soul Degree. I'm not sure how involved you are with 143 Studios in Boston, but you're a busy guy. We always like to, though, kind of start at this same kind of point. How are things going being a dad? What's going on lately? I think your kids are a little older than Adam and my kids, so maybe give us like a little bit of an age range and just let us know how you're doing.
Where are yours?
Adam, go for it.
My 2 daughters are 11 and 8.
And I have twins that just turned 7 just a few days ago.
All right. Okay. Yeah, I'm sure you've heard people say cherish those moments because they're sometimes hard to remember when you get another decade beyond them.
Yeah, it can be challenging, trying to keep that in mind, especially when the chaos is at its peak, but and emotions are high and every day kind of feels like a roller coaster. But we are doing our best, Mark and I, to live in the moment and be present and kind of celebrate that. Your kids are all in the 20 to 25, 26 range. Is that right?
Yeah, I should say in the fall, we dropped our youngest off at college for his freshman year. Mm. So that was technically supposed to be the beginning of our empty nest realm. But we still had our eldest daughter, who's 25, She had moved back in, as they often do, like a year prior. And it was awesome to have her. And then she was like, this is great, but I need to go, live in New York City. So
Oh, wow.
I moved her in about 2 weeks ago, which is really kind of technically the beginning of Mel and I having the house to ourselves and beginning a very different chapter of parenthood or parenting. It obviously never ends, as you know. Always a parent, which is at this stage for me, I think a real blessing. I think it's the reason why Mel and I even thought about kids was, an underlying sort of selfish piece that said, well, shit, man, if we're going to grow old, let's do it in, the company of a tribe that we love. And, it's not to say that you don't feel the tribe when they're the same age that you guys are navigating right now, but you get to this stage where they're launching or they're launched and they're getting a sense of what it looks like to be human outside of the comfort of home, which is such a loving, understanding, or at least I shouldn't say that. It's not the case for everybody. And for those that don't experience that, I feel for that. But, comparatively to either being a college kid or being, a young adult out there, it's very different than, knowing that your fridge is full and somebody's in the kitchen ready to give you a hug. But yeah, it's been an awesome, I should say, 25 years of experiencing what it's like to be a father for those very instrumental years. I mean, I have only just recently thought about that sort of old adage that by the time they hit 18, you're pretty much done. Like there's nothing.
Well, there's plenty to look forward to still, right? But they're not relying on you in the same ways, I suppose.
Yeah. And they're not all of their thought patterns, but certainly there's been some real things grooved 0 to 18 that you're not going to have near as much influence on. Not that that's important, but that they get that from so many different places once they get outside the walls of here.
It's hard for me to imagine becoming a truly empty nester, but is your instinct to just like FaceTime them all the time? Like you always reaching for your phone, like wondering what they're doing now and wanting to see them and be connected?
Mel's a lot more like that than I am. I mean, I love, seeing them, but I'm a guy, so I'm not great at even doing that to begin with. But I do really look forward to, just hearing about what the hell's going on in their world, which is kind of an interesting thing because it makes me think about, I grew up with 3 boys and, of course we weren't walking around with mobile phones in our back pocket, but even still, the level to which we relayed anything about anything to, mom or dad was like non-existent. And so we're a little bit spoiled in this day and age where we can, we've got them so tethered or vice versa that we can even see where they are and what they're doing. It's pretty wild, honestly. Yeah. But it's a little bit more of a surprise for me, and I hear it by phone more than I do FaceTime.
Yeah. I kind of wonder if your feelings about getting to the empty nest stage, I should say it this way, like as you were getting closer to that over the years, like I wonder if you sort of formulated, this is how this is probably going to feel. Because there's some stuff that's so hard to sort of put your finger on until you go through it. But I know we try to do this thing where we kind of anticipate so that we have these expectations, especially with big things like my kids are going to be now leaving and going out into the world. And I just wonder if you have a sense, it sounds like it's still sort of new for you guys right now, but do you have a sense of like, we thought it was going to be like this and now this is the reality of what it's like? And are those things similar or is it different now that you're in it?
Yeah. First of all, I would say it's early days,
Yeah.
it really began a few weeks ago. So, but I think that the anticipation of it being quieter, literally and figuratively, is a natural one. But with that being said, I would say something that feels a little bit different is their proximity and the reality that, at least for what we've created amongst our family and our kids, there is no desire to go hit the eject button on family. Like when I was 21, not that I did, I mean, I had a fine relationship with my parents for sure, but it was just like, okay, that's the exit door.
See ya. Yeah.
And see you later. And,
Yeah.
Then I was out there just trying to like either prove or hide, one or the other, for the next 3 decades of my life, which is a whole nother story. And today, at least with our kids, like they're just super psyched to be in our company. And there's a lot of connectivity that I think will continue to blossom rather than kind of shrink back a little bit because suddenly they're out of the proverbial home.
You've mentioned this in a couple of different ways already during the few minutes that we've been chatting, but you mentioned, being a guy, you're less inclined to maybe like reach out or establish connection, or when you were talking about growing up with brothers, your communication with your parents. And I know that all of that kind of subject matter is stuff that you're exploring in Soul Degree, right? Men's just lack of instinct to be vulnerable and to explore your own feelings and self-esteem. And I've been following Soul Degree for a bit now, but I wonder if you would just maybe give our listeners sort of the elevator pitch of what it is, so that they can have a little bit of context when they go and check it out themselves.
Yeah, well, in its most simplistic form, Soul Degree is like a space for men to step out of what is otherwise, and particularly, as you guys described for your own situation with younger kids, and that there is a frenetic pace that we can get wrapped around and lose sight of, just stuff that may be more meaningful or which matters more than what we think we're getting up every day to do. And so the format, if you will, of the experience is that I host a dozen men from all over twice a year to participate in a 5-day retreat that is sort of the beginning of what ends up being 4 or 5 months of us spending time together, having, like you said, many of these conversations about kind of the journey we're on as men and where is it working, where is it not, mostly trying to capture these fleeting moments of, okay, like, let's slow it all down here for a minute here and either try to zoom out or zoom in, because it's just rare that we take that time for us guys. I think that it's safe for me to make that sweeping generalization. I believe it after all the men I've sat with, is that, we're not just selfish pricks seeking power. We're putting a lot of shit before ourselves and then completely getting lost in the fact that we didn't even, we can't spell hobby, much less, find ourselves doing things like caring for our bodies and our minds or our, personal development or whatever, like just actually slowing down to read a book and drink a cup of tea, because that's what you really want to do.
Yeah.
So Soul Degree has been, it's been sort of in the, almost a decade of this being certainly an experience that I'm passionate about, but also something that I personally feel the need to be a participant in, which explains why I'm not like that. I don't just make this about my livelihood or make it about, do lots of it because because I'd rather do fewer of them and have it be an experience that I really can drop into myself because I need it just as much as the next guy.
I'd love to know how much of what goes on in like these retreats, like when you're at a soul degree retreat. I wonder how much of the sort of conversation and what goes on there revolves around fatherhood. And I wonder that from like the two perspectives of assuming that some of these folks are dads, right? Because if we're working on ourselves and if that's part of the mission, then in theory, we're sort of, if we're better, then we can do a better job at taking care of our children. But then I also kind of wonder, many of us have dads. And there's this sort of thing, at least that Adam and I have found repeatedly when we're talking with just each other, but also with any of our guests, that there's always this sort of thing that we're sort of balancing of, this is what I know it means to be a dad because that's what I got growing up. And then I have these other new ideals that are constantly sort of shifting and changing because now I'm a dad and I'm trying to look that way. Right. So I just wonder in these retreats, how much of it is tied to the topic of fatherhood.
I mean, I would say that it is a major league through line, particularly the part about the fathers we have or had or didn't have. Mm-hmm. A lot of horror stories. So I think that's more of a either direct or indirect line of conversation about what makes us who we are. And some of that is a derivative of, okay, now how do we show up as parents in the eyes of our own children? And, obviously some people are like, he was a prick and I'm not going to do it like he was, or, whatever people have. Some people, you can't get away from the DNA, and we are so much our dads, like it's crazy. And so too are our own kids like us. It's insane. Those are hard to extract from any given conversation about like, how did I get here and who am I really and where do I want to go? And, I think about it for myself. Like it's definitely, it's who my father was a powerful rail I put myself on, thinking that at some level, my subconscious said, you got to be like him. You got to do like him. You got to make him proud. And in my instance, like my dad wasn't around a lot, not that he didn't want to be, but he was just physically and emotionally absent because of the work that he poured himself into and the bottle. Like, he was a high functioning drinker for sure. But it's easy to Monday morning quarterback how the guy before you did it versus just taking in that he did what he did. And what does that mean relative to the experience you're having in life right now, either as a regular guy doing whatever you're doing or as, the dad on his knees in front of his, 10-year-old.
Mm-hmm. It's got to be like a pretty deeply therapeutic experience, even if it's not structured to be that way. Like, do you find that it's the people who are there who are coaching each other just as much as you are leading and teaching and coaching them?
Yeah. It is kind of a misnomer, but there is no coaching, not by me and not by anybody in these forums. On the one hand, I encourage people to say, hey, look, if you're going to come do something like this, which is a little bit of a foreign experience for, to circle up in the company of 12 guys you don't know in the woods and do things like meditate and yoga and, have different kinds of conversations. This is foreign subject matter for a lot of people. I'm like, if you're going to come do it, make sure you come and put yourself out there to do some work on something that matters, whatever that is. It could be your marriage or your job career or your fatherhood or whatever, but come ready to work. And at the same time, I think the benefit of being in those circles, like honestly, any group circles, therapy or otherwise, is just that by way of hearing who people are, how they are showing up what they've experienced. Like you just draw so much for yourself. And so I think that the dynamic of just sharing one story is enough. And from there, like the fuse is lit to suddenly have permission to be like, oh, okay, like it's cool to talk about the fact that, I was molested by my dad, or, I, lost $100 million, or I shot somebody by accident, like whatever the things are. It's just like, it opens a good Pandora's box that then allows people to kind of turn it back in and draw from it what they need to. I think the thing about therapy, which I'm a big proponent of, is, you don't always go into it with some form of intentionality, I think, and that's okay too. There's a nice ebb and flow there where people have real things they want to come to work on, hopefully. Otherwise, like, go on a different trip.
Right.
Like, don't come spend 5 days unless you're really psyched to do that kind of work. And I think on some level it is work for sure.
You have to put in the work, even if what the result that you're sort of looking for is this slower, calmer, more centered, less spread out, mentality or whatever. Just the sort of juxtaposition of saying you got to do that with energy is such an interesting way to frame it.
I did want to shift gears a little bit, Chris, and talk a little more about your family and your fatherhood experience. So I know that your daughter Sawyer just co-wrote along with Mel, this very successful book called The Let Them Theory. And I wonder for you as a dad, what it was like kind of seeing that process unfold and seeing this, amazing collaboration take place between your daughter and your partner.
Oh my God, that is there's a lot of dimension to that subject. I've been present for 3 books other than this latest one that Mel has birthed. And it is like that, it's sort of this, I don't know if you guys written a book before. I have not, but it's a creative process that kind of needs to often take its own form. And Mel is, God love her, like she's brilliant for what she does, but some of that also comes from like a very, even like ADD frame of mind. And so like putting the pieces together, if it's somebody else's job to create organization to what otherwise can be a chaotic creative process, that's a real challenge. And Sawyer wasn't sure she knew what she wanted to do a year ago. She was pretty sure she didn't want to do anything with her mom. I mean, they have a great, they have a great relationship, but she was like, yeah, it's probably a third rail I don't want to touch because for all the obvious reasons. And sure enough, it was that. Like it was both a beautiful, creative, collaborative thing of beauty. At the same time, it was a mother and a daughter, just having these knockdown, drag out. I mean, we're jumping up and down at 9 a.m. We're in tears by like 10:30. By noon, like we're not sure about lunch. 2 o'clock, you're jumping up and down again. By the time 5 rolls around, it's like everything's horrible and we're fucked. And that went on for a good year, and I got to say, I mean, Mel she was more proud of this book than I remember seeing her of a book that she had produced before. So that was cool. I was experiencing a lot of pride from Mel, and just this belief like, wow, actually this could make a difference for people out there potentially. I mean, it's kind of this dirt simple rule that's near impossible to like implement on a consistent basis. But I think the cooler thing was that when it was all said and done, Sawyer's real interest as a young 25-year-old, she just, her interest all along has been in marketing and really like, okay, once the book is done, like, can't wait to do the marketing and the promotion for it. That was really where her interest was. And, but I asked her, I was like, how much of this book do you feel like your own fingerprints are on, like the actual content, thinking the answer would be like maybe 20 or 30, knowing how opinionated and stiff-armed, Mel can be sometimes with her own ideas. And Sawyer was like, yeah, I feel like 50% of this book is influenced by me, which as a dad, talk about fatherhood, like there was some pride. And wow, what an incredible, lucky, fortuitous thing for her at her age to have that experience of creating a body of work that is having a real impact.
Do you think through the process at all, it changed a little bit of what Sawyer maybe wants to now consider pursuing and spending time on professionally, I suppose?
Yeah. I mean, I think for the time being, she's getting used to being a New Yorker and, she's carry on with Mel, and Mel's office is in Boston. So there's a little commuting back and forth. Plus she's got a love interest in Boston. But in terms of like how it plays out down the road, she's always struck me as being pretty ambitious and entrepreneurial. And so I think I suspect she will either remain in the quote unquote family business because she's good at it, she knows it and she likes it, or if she does her own thing, I think it's going to be certainly in that content creation, marketing realm.
You mentioned your family business. Obviously, both you and Mel have built these very successful careers. And now you have these 3 kids who are entering the real world, so to speak, and they all have their own unique individual talents. Where do you stand on, encouraging them to either go like totally pursue their own thing or giving them the option or the opportunity to kind of be part of this family thing that we're building together?
I think it is a tendency of parenting to at least want to feel like you're doing a good job of putting up the guardrails that might prevent bad accidents. But I only know what I know, which is that hitting those guardrails early and often or at velocity are where, there's all the pain and the growth. And it's freaking inevitable that, the way we move through life to avoid those things. And you can't get around the psychological, the emotional, the mental roadblocks that come with growing up. Like there's no short route to being your age or my age. Or just isn't. Like the only way, whatever they say, is through. And I hope they will, push their own envelope. Like even the fact that the next generation or their generation is like, they're negotiating hours of working days or number of days, just like they would a salary, because they recognize the importance of like capturing their own time. Mm-hmm. Brilliant. But I think that in the case of this generation, like their bigger challenge is the fact that the phone isn't attached to the wall with a cord.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think so from what I sort of know, you've had a pretty wide ranging career from, I think, in the sort of restaurant world, but also as a death doula, if I have that right, from sort of the restaurant, which I guess maybe would be a little bit more of the corporate side of things, to now in this space that we're talking about that's much more spiritual and like one of self-discovery. how did that sort of transition happen
Yeah.
for you? Or was maybe the spiritual thing always there, maybe nagging, and it just,
I mean, speaking of fatherhood, I think it was the loss of my dad. I think, because until he died, I was blind to the fact that I was chasing his love in every move I was making as a career guy.
Yeah.
I mean, my dad wasn't in the restaurant business. He wasn't a commodity trader or a software sales guy or, the gazillions of, all the things that I did. And that's kind of what I was alluding to earlier with my own kids, is that I hope that they will go push the envelope and explore, but they'll do it joyfully instead of like where I was coming from, where I was jumping into new industries and new jobs, not because my soul was telling me that's really what I needed or wanted to do, but because I thought that's what I should do in order to either go make money, more options, more titles, whatever I thought was going to attract the love and attention that I was seeking from my father. So it's a little messed up, but that's basically the net of the noose that was around my neck, I think, for many years until he died. And then when he died, I was in the middle of the restaurant business, and I went into effectively my own midlife without kind of knowing it. But then the business started to spiral, and I found myself in a super deep dark hole. The failure of it all, the public failure of it, the money, in hindsight, I probably should have said, fucking pull your bootstraps up, man. You chose to be an entrepreneur in the hardest industry there is, and you did a damn good job while it lasted, but you failed like most people do, and so carry on. But I took it really hard, and it nearly killed me and bankrupted me and all the other things. But it was in that kind of grieving process, mostly of my dad, but probably the business too, that kind of led me to pursuing things like Soul Degree and putting it together, and then studying Buddhism and becoming a meditation guide. And I had my yoga certification before, but even yoga as a concept is just like, it's sort of bottomless in terms of the whole study of self or what's going on inside. So one thing led to another, I'm going back to school and getting, I went and got my MBA back in the day because I thought that's what I needed to be like smart and rich. I'm getting my, master's in spiritual psychology today because it's wild, being in a classroom that's talking about dreams or holotropic breath work or the origin of, consciousness, whatever the hell that means. So it's definitely, the pendulum has swung in that regard, in the sense that today I do a lot of things. And even the death doula work, like, that came out of first a recognition that death is a real thing in the company of sitting with guys, the loss of our aging parents, just dying in general, and how, of course, we don't talk about it. And then it made me think, well, damn, when my dad died, I was just so ill-equipped to really absorb and just deal with his death. And I was bummed about that. So I was like, I'm going to sort of figure out what this death doula thing is, because one, I knew it would expand the topics and the realm of conversation that I could be having with guys, but also just as a way to revisit what the hell went down with my own dad. And, I had been volunteering with hospice. So the idea of sitting with people had come into my interest over the years. I mean, looking back even on my very colorful, and it's just all the things that I did before I really dropped into a dark hole, it was good stuff. I labeled it all as terrible because I wasn't doing like what my dad did, where he went from, a nobody in the mailroom to the CEO of the 9th largest advertising company in the world. And like many of our parents' generation, just one thing, like this generation, or like what I was doing was, I think, a little odd to have been through 15 different jobs plus 10 years of being a restaurateur by the age of 45.
I was reading a blog entry that you wrote maybe like 10 years ago, but it really, it's a good one though. Don't worry. And it hit close to home because you were talking about, and I'll just quote it. You were saying, for much too long, I've mistaken fatherhood as an act of doing versus being. And then you go on to talk about, the importance of listening. And I wonder if you can speak to that idea a little bit, but I also wonder, as your kids have gotten older, they're 10 years older now than when you first wrote that, like how has that changed or evolved, this idea of listening? Or I think you said, your whole existence is being in service to them and their growth, how that's kind of evolved now that they're in their early and mid 20s.
Just before I hit high school, my dad announced that we were moving to London, England. My two older brothers were already in college, so I was essentially forced out of my hometown that I grew up in, and I went kicking and screaming like a spoiled brat. And in the end, it ended up being a phenomenal experience of being in high school over there. But as a way to dangle a carrot, my dad said, well, let's go over and look at the school, and let's also go skiing, in the Alps for a couple of days, which I was a big skier. That's all I really cared about. So I was like, okay, great, I'm in. And we get over there, and he has this, unbeknownst to me, this corporate dinner in this little mountain town in the middle of, Italy and Switzerland. And I'm a 14-year-old in a sea of like suits in this restaurant, and I got a chip on my shoulder because I don't want to be there. And there's one guy there, one of my dad's colleagues, is asking me a bunch of questions. Anyway, the next morning I wake up, and my dad kind of lays into me a little bit for being a little blasé, a little out of it. Like he knew that I was disengaged, not paying attention. And then he asked me, he said, who did you find interesting, if anyone? And I was like, oh, well, this one guy. And it was the guy who had asked me a lot of questions that night. And, my dad in so many words was like, never forget that the guy who's most interested is the most interesting. And at the time, I'm young and impressionable, and I just want to make friends. And I also want to please my dad. So I sort of adopted that in a backwards kind of way and really took deep interest initially, maybe to prove something. But over time, I think it became really genuine interest and curiosity in people. And I think that really helped shape the degree to which I'm a big believer in listening. But my kids, to answer your question about the kids, is that they do and have spoken about drawing that sense of curiosity into their own lives. And that's pretty cool to hear.
I love that. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah. Chris, I'll speak for both of us. We appreciate this conversation. Your thoughtfulness is appreciated. So I just want to say that. Parents listening, you can learn more about Chris at souldegree.com. You can find all of Chris's social media handles and everything. We're going to have a lot of that in our show notes in this episode. Chris, thank you very much for coming on to Modern Dadhood and sharing a little bit of your perspective.
Cool. Well, it's a pleasure to meet you, Mark and Adam. Thank you for taking the time.
Thanks, Chris. Well, here's the deal. This is the section of the show where we typically do like a recurring segment, such as confessions, or
That's
such as what else?
Did I just say that out loud?
Or what's another one?
So
and
that's a
disses.
thing.
So that's a thing now. We're not going to do that this time because, as I understand it, you had yourself a weekend recently.
Well, I just wanted to maybe tell you a little bit about what went on this weekend, and maybe it'll comfort some of the listeners knowing that chaos is inevitability when you have children, especially of a younger age, but who knows? I don't know. I don't have older kids yet, so maybe it's chaotic for a lot longer. But so in the Checkin household, we've been passing some sicknesses around, right? So there's that baseline of like, this has been a non-fully 100% healthy environment now for going quite a while.
Years, right?
Okay,
like multiple years.
It's been since 2017.
I mean, any
actually.
family with kids who go to any kind of schools, like that happens. But I will say, the Check-Its pass viruses back and forth like nothing I've seen.
Yeah, and we clean our house. Okay, I'm not like, come on.
I'm not saying you're dirty people.
I mean,
I've been to your house. You're clean.
I just want everybody to know, like, we wash our hands and stuff, you know. But currently, it's strep throat, so that sucks. You know,
it's awful.
Strep throat's terrible. If you've ever had it, you know it sucks. And one of my sons, in particular, when he gets strep throat, he just gets like, it's the one thing that knocks him down. Like most other sicknesses, he kind of gets and then he's over quickly. This one just like knocks him down, and he missed school for an entire week.
That's pretty devastating.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, I'm talking like lymph nodes the size of like grapefruits. Like, it's absurd to the point where his entire voice changes. Everything's just pinched in there. So he's a sad sap. And we were just, Friday came around. He was starting to get a little bit better. Saturday, still very irritable, but like his voice was back. We were all thinking like, hey man, we're over this, right? We're getting through it. Maybe Sunday is going to be awesome.
Yeah.
So we're halfway.
Can I go ahead and throw a guess out into the universe?
Sure. Yeah.
Sunday rolled around and things weren't quite as peachy as you expected.
Yeah. I mean, so it was a regular Sunday. I decided in the morning we should make chili. Haven't made chili in a while. So by the mid-afternoon, I'm out at the grocery store picking up some ground beef. I'm like 3/4 of the way through, right? I get a little text message here from the missus, which usually is, oh, by the way, get this while you're there. And it just says, little incident, period.
Oh, shit.
Just need your help, period. Thanks.
Oh, no.
That could be like somebody had a meltdown, right? So I said, on my way. And then a second later, I'm like, is anyone hurt? And then I got, yeah, ... And then I'm waiting.
Oh, no.
And I get a text message of a photo of one of my sons in the bathroom, blood just streaming down his face.
No.
Pretty decent gash over the left eye. Kind of like where, like if you're like a boxer and you get pegged, right? And it just splits that.
Yeah. And facial wounds like tend to bleed.
They bleed. Yeah. And then she sends that and then immediately follows it up with, looks worse than it is, which I don't know why that tickles me because it looks really bad.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, I guess there was a laser tag game going on. Everybody was having a great time. One of my sons couldn't reload fast enough. Got a little frustrated, close quarter combat. And instead of using the little laser gun as a gun, my other son used it just as a blunt object too.
A pistol whip.
Yeah. That's what he did. He pistol whipped his brother.
Oh, shit. Okay.
And it was a whole thing. And then that was the rest of our day so I scooted home, checked out the wound. It was clearly stitch worthy. So we ultimately ended up taking him to the emergency room and they used the glue. So that was cool. And then it was a whole thing, it's one of those situations where you just feel this mixture of conflicting feelings. And it's all pretty heightened when you see your kid hurt badly and you know that it's your other kid that did it. You're stuck right in the middle of wanting to give all of your attention to the child that's hurt. You're upset at the other child. Mm-hmm. Of course, you still love the other child. And you also want to make sure that kid knows that you love them.
Mm-hmm.
You also want to make sure that they know they fucked up, you know,
Yes.
and that you're kind of pissed about that part of it. And I mean, luckily I'm not in the middle of situations like that all too often, but I will say, I mean, I don't know what your experience has been like, if that's something that's happened in your household, but this is not the first time that this kind of situation has happened where there's a pretty decently bad injury because of an altercation between the two of them. And I just have this crazy mixture of feelings and emotions, and it's really hard to like direct those in the right way and maintain a sense of like calmness and control to within a degree, like of the situation. Cause you got real life decisions that need to be made like right then and there, you know,
Yep.
like, do we go to the ER? Cause this kid's going to have a pretty gnarly scar on his forehead. Maybe if we don't, you know.
Do you think that the, we'll call him the aggressor.
The assailant.
Do you think he understood the gravity of the situation? Like, it's one thing to tell a kid, like, you can't do that. That's a really big problem. You know, whatever. You'll be in trouble if you do it again. We're really disappointed. But then it's another thing that, like, when you have to bring your other kid to the emergency room, stay there for a good portion of the day. It's going to cost a lot of money, no matter what your insurance looks like. Huge inconvenience. And his brother's like hurt pretty badly.
Yeah.
Does he understand the severity of it? And do you think it will make a difference in the long run? Or is it kind of like I
think in other incidents in the past, I questioned whether they understood to that degree.
Yeah.
In this instance, I think some of it has to do with the way that Jamie and I handled the situation, but also they're a little bit older. And also, like, it was pretty bad, you know, like it was pretty, you know, initially the aggressor ran upstairs because everybody was really upset, and he was really upset and started crying, sobbing. I didn't mean to do that. I didn't mean to hurt him. And then later in the evening, nobody asked him to do this. We're going to bed. My other son has his head glued back together, and we're just doing the nighttime routine. And he came into the room on his own. He wouldn't look at his brother or us for that matter. But he said, like, as if he was in mid thought, he was like, well, anyway, I'm really sorry about what happened.
well, anyway, it's actually pretty funny.
It's kind of hilarious.
Yeah.
Like, it just makes you kind of wonder, like, what was going on in his brain before he got to saying that. But I think he gets it. That's a long-winded answer to say, I think he gets it this time around. And we're not pushing it, hammering it, you know, like he's understanding it like in his own way on his own time. And I think because of that, I think it might stick with him, you know, way more than us being like, what you did was wrong and here's why and yada, yada.
Well, congrats on handling that situation as best you could.
Oh, man.
Glad he's okay.
Thanks. Me too.
Glad he's okay.
Me too.
All right. Long episode.
Mm-hmm.
Great story. Long episode. Let's close it out fast.
Life is chaotic, friends, which is why you need more Modern Dadhood, Modern Dadhood, the podcast in your life.
As Mark shared at the top, you can find all of our episodes on all of the podcast platforms, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, Hark Audio, all of them. And you can just search Modern Dadhood. You can also find our entire archive of episodes at moderndadhood.com, where if you want to search by theme or topic, for example, you can do that, or by guest name, and it'll populate all the episodes for you there. While you're on the site, you can buy yourself or someone that you care about a Modern Dadhood t-shirt or a dad hoodie. You could sign up for our email list. You can watch a whole slew of videos. I mean, you could spend a whole day and probably a day and a half.
Honestly, yeah.
On moderndadhood.com.
You could just have a hoot at moderndadhood.com. Hey, if you want to send us a note, you can also send us a note to hey, at moderndadhood.com. And that email will go directly to our little inboxes.
Please consider subscribing and leaving us a review wherever you listen. We always like to say thank you to Casper Baby Pants and to Spencer Albee for the music in our podcast. We definitely want to thank Chris Robbins for being such an awesome guest and for the fruitful conversation. And Marc Checkett, you love to deliver the last thank you, and nobody can do it quite like you can. So why don't you take over from here?
I appreciate that, Adam. I'd like to say thank you for listening.